We've now been running the agency for 4 years. We've got 20 staff, worked with the NHS, Ocean Beach, a bunch of global brands. And if you went to our LinkedIns right now, you'd see all the wins, us celebrating clients, hitting results, breaking records, doing campaigns. But we very rarely get to show the massive mistakes we've made, and there's been a lot of big mistakes we've made over the last few years, I think.
Yeah, so today we're going to be walking through what number is it?
Six
of the biggest mistakes. Today we're going to be walking through 6 of the biggest mistakes we've made as agency owners.
Watched the vlog before. I'm Niall, this is Morgan. We are 2 brothers who run a marketing agency called Noticed. We grew up in Burnley. The agency is now based in Manchester, and we are most well known for our work with the NHS, Ocean Beach. Got a gazillion views for clients, millions in revenue.
Just millions and millions in revenue.
You couldn't even count.
You couldn't count the amount of millions in revenue.
Yeah, I don't know if everyone knows this. The company was originally called Ratcliffe Brothers, and we originally chose it, I think, was like because we couldn't think of a name, so we were like, let's just call it Ratcliffe Brothers, and we were like, that seems pretty cool, and we'll think of a name at some point. And we never did. So we were like 2 years in, we'd hit like a certain milestone, we're struggling to grow. And we went in, we were doing an advisory session with Dom.
So Dom McGregor, fun fact, co-founded Social Chain with Stephen Bartlett. He also is a director here at Fearless Adventures. They're an investment firm. And we knew the Social Chain story, and it was one of the things we were trying to build our business around. We were like, we love Social Chain, we love what they did, the creative marketing, all that stuff, so we knew of Dom. And then he went on a podcast called We Have a Meeting podcast with Jack Frimston. Jack Frimston's a friend of ours, and he was like, Dom's amazing, he's in Manchester and he does advisory for companies, like I think he'd be open to doing a session with you. So we had an initial call with Dom and he was like, you should come in the office and have a conversation. So we literally flew from Portugal to here, this very room, and we sat here with him, did the advisory in these chairs, and the hour turned into about 3 hours or something like that. And we ended up doing basically a whole afternoon with him. It went late and he broke down the brand. He was impressed with where we were at, and that's how we ended up with the office too.
We explained the entire business to him, and then he just sat there and went, brand's way off. What do you mean? And he was like, the brand is like, you'll never get to where you want to go if like you just have your name above the door. And I remember we were like, yeah at the time. And then we walked to the car and we sat in the car after and we were like, surely we're not changing the name. Like, surely we're going to keep it. And then like we slowly digested it and was like, shit. We have to change the brand, we have to change the name. And then we spent 2-3 weeks like trying to think of every name, like going through the alphabet, going through each letter. And we were trying to find a word that described exactly what we did, that was like an outcome for clients. And then one day we literally found Noticed, and within like 30 minutes we'd like gone and bought the domain, and that's when we became Noticed. I think literally straight after that, the brand, that trajectory of growth did skyrocket, and we can confirm that Dom was very much right, but the brand was the way off. I think getting the brand is so important from like a outside perspective.
Like the lesson to learn from that is you can't just call it after your last name because it doesn't work. Also, you need to have something that resonates with people who are going to buy from you, something memorable that people can say, oh, we work with this company, and then also a brand that kind of builds a tone. So in our case, I think Ratcliffe Brothers did a bad job because it sounds like a shipping company, or it sounds like, that they are like
Ratcliffe and Nephew.
Yeah, does that make sense? It's like it's definitely not a fun, exciting marketing agency. So like almost it tainted the brand slightly, where it keeps you small, and it's like, oh, it's either 2 brothers doing something together. And at the point we had 15 staff. So one of the big things that Dom said was like, I thought you were just 2 brothers in Portugal killing it. He was sat on this exact chair and he went, I thought you were 2 brothers killing it in Portugal. Why have you got 15 people?
In there you mentioned almost like mistake number 2, which was like offers and getting into the right like budget. Because at the time we talked to Dom, we were pitching like individuals on our services.
Yeah, so this is something that a lot of people get wrong, and what we definitely got wrong. And in our case, what it looked like is that we were selling to individuals. You have to understand that in B2B that you want to sell into a budget bucket. So like someone's in a boardroom, what are they moaning about? And what are they saying? Look, we need to put budget aside to solve this problem. So an easy way to think about it is that when we first started, we were like, we are amazing LinkedIn writers. We'll help you get views on LinkedIn. Nobody in the history of ever sat in a boardroom and was like, God, if only a couple of people had more views on LinkedIn.
If only we had a LinkedIn writer.
Yeah, if only we had a singular LinkedIn writer that gets more views on LinkedIn. People sit in the boardroom and they actually say, well, we were trying to generate 300 MQLs over the last quarter and we fell short on that. let's put budget aside to try and generate more MQLs so we can bring in more revenue and hit targets. Or they might say, well, look, we had a growth target for this quarter and we fell short of that growth target. Was it sales? Was it marketing? Okay, from a B2B marketing perspective, how can we bring in more people? Or they might say, you know, how do we be more exciting and get more people to see us? Like, there's a million different problems people actually have. As opposed to being like, we're an amazing B2B marketing agency that can help you get views online. Now we are where companies go to get noticed, sign your biggest clients, you know, attract your best talent, grow your business. Like, they're outcomes that someone can really get behind. And it's shown because obviously now we work with massive companies with big budgets, and them understanding like we can pay noticed to come in, decide who we want to target those people, bring those in as new clients is a massively different offer to, we're a great marketing agency.
I just realised we wrote down the list and 50% are all like lessons that Dom taught, or mistakes we realised after talking with Dom.
Big up Dom McGregor.
But the third one we had on there was like generalist versus specialist. So when we first started hiring, we wrote out our team structure when we sat down with Dom. We were like, here's who we have in this role, here's who we have, here's how the teams work out. And he literally like was a bit puzzled, and he was like, you've just hired all the generalists. And we were like, what do you mean? And at the time we had like a pod structure.
What's the pod structure?
So most agencies structured like ours are, where they have like a creative team, they'll have an accounts team or a client services team, and then they'll have whatever else they do. So let's say they might have like a technical SEO team, and the accounts team will then go to each individual specialist team and get them to fulfill their part of the brief, and they go back and give it to the client. And how we were set up, which is actually semi-popular nowadays, is a pod structure, where rather than having specialist teams, you make mini pods to deliver for clients. So for us, it was an account manager, an account executive, and a copywriter. And each pod would have 6 to 7 clients in it. And the issue we had was like each team had 2 generalists and 1 copywriter. And that just meant that like from a client service perspective, they were getting like okay results from the 2 generalists. Sat in the car afterwards and we're just like, oh my God, we're gonna have to restructure the entire like org structure and figure out where everyone fits in. But the biggest takeaway was like 1 to 5 staff, you can have like 4 or 5 generalists, but from like 5 to 30, you need to have like, this person's great at ads, or this person's great at content, or this person's great at account management, and they can't do all of it. And we started to hire specialists one by one. And again, that was like a massive thing trajectory-wise. Like we could never work with the clients we work with now if we had a pod structure with an account manager.
One of the things I think to take away from a couple of those things initially is like, that's the whole business that we've just talked about there. We talked about changing the entire brand, the entire team structure and the offer, which is the entire business. And like, if you're not doing that, like every single person who's running a company that's doing anything ever has that same story of like, well, the day we started, it doesn't look like today. And you pretty much change everything, and you have to be willing to change everything. Like we could have gone back to Dom and been like, yeah, we're not changing the brand. Oh yeah, we're not changing the org structure, or we're not changing the offer. But tweaking and changing, and we'll change it, you know, between now and, you know, 70 people. I'm sure that the offer will change and that the org structure will change and tweak slightly. So
a lot of people, I think, fall into the category of like, we need to do this or it's not going to be done right.
We took on a newsletter client where we were running, basically they launched a big newsletter, a big sales asset that pushed to tens of thousands of emails.
I think they had 15,000 subs at the time.
15,000 email subs came through the sales asset, and all of a sudden, basically developing a newsletter that was to thousands of people, and I delivered the entire thing. I delivered basically the graphic design, the ideation, I was writing the copy, I was finding all the bits.
It's doing account management as well. You actually talking
I was doing
client calls with
I was doing the account management. The question is, well, why were you doing all that stuff? And you go, well, because that was a big client that came on board. I wanted them to be delivered for well. And they say, well, you should trust the staff, and you should make sure that the people that you bring on board are competent for you to trust. So that's the lesson there. And there's another thing of like, well, you hold on to margin, and you're like, well, if I don't have to hire people, then that's going to save me some money, and then we'll get to keep this money from this client. But that's just not the way to grow a business. You've got to be able to trust people and give people individual responsibility for projects. And Andrew Wilkinson says allowing mini fires, which is allowing things to go wrong enough for people to learn from their mistakes, but not allowing them to burn things down. It's so important to be able to say, like, you know, if I was doing that project again today, I would trust the team with that project and allow them to learn throughout the project and execute it probably better than I could have done on my own, as opposed to being like, God, I've got to do this on my own. The next one that people just don't talk about enough, or at least I think is an interesting one that people don't mention, is the finances, and we've got an interesting story behind that.
And for like 2 or 3 years, this company existed like off eyeballing finances. And what I mean by that is it's like, how much is in the bank account? How much revenue do we make? What are our expenses? And they were like the only 3 numbers we knew.
Is there more money in the bank than there were last month? Yeah, we're sound.
It sounds stupid, but we're actually just really focused on service. And like the actual thing we were thinking was, as long as we keep improving the service as long as we keep delivering for clients, the numbers will just take care of themselves. I once sat down with Mitch Clayton from Flowed, and we were just having like a general chat, and he said like, what's your EBITDA margin this quarter? And I was like, no idea. And he was like, oh, well, what was it last year? And I was like, no idea. And he was like, what's your EBITDA in general? And I was like, oh, I think we make about this much in profit. And he was like, you've got no idea on your numbers. And he actually said to me, he was like, no matter how good you think you're going to be at the service, if you don't get a handle on your numbers, this company won't exist in 2 years. Something that you don't realise is that because of like cash flow, if your company breaks even, you'll actually go under, because like people will delay payments, then you'll be behind 1 month, which is like not something that I was ever taught. Like all I knew was like, you make revenue, your expenses are this much, here's your profit. And what it doesn't take into account is like, generally speaking, 20% of clients will be like late payers. Whatever money you're actually making, you'll probably make about 80% of it in cash flow that month. Not to mention, we signed the NHS, 90-day payment terms. Anyone's late, like it starts to really get complicated with cash flow. And getting a handle on finances was the one thing that's helped me sleep at night.
Some problem happens and you still have to pay the team every month, and we've had clients say to us, oh, actually we've got this big thing coming in 2 months' time, what I'm going to do is delay payments for the next 2 months and pay you all at once there, and you suddenly just go, well, that's not how the contract works. Oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? It's less important if you want to just be 2 people or 1 person. Ridiculously important if you want to actually grow. Like, last one now, if you had to say one more big mistake we've made, what would you throw it out as?
For me, definitely, I think in general across the company, I think like being too nice. I think that originally we just thought that like we had this like picturesque idea that like the best companies would be like happy-go-lucky and everyone just loves work and it's like just such a fun place to work.
And being too nice, I think, leads to a deterioration of everyone's performance. Whereas people in sports teams, football specifically in the UK, aren't particularly nice to each other. Like they're shouting and screaming at them. If someone in the team's not performing, they're abusing them on the pitch, they're shouting at them and trying to bring them to the best of their performance, but they're still working together towards a collective goal. And in the same with the Olympics, like you're not on the Olympic team if you're not performing well. And the way to frame it is, if you're too nice, you'd never get that level of performance out of a person, yet you can still have like an amazingly collaborative environment with those types of, like that type of pressure, I suppose, is the way to put it. People often shy away from having tough conversations. That being said, nobody benefits from avoiding tough conversations. You want to have them early. That helps everybody, both you and the person you've got to have the conversation with.
I have one that's particular story where we had someone who was really underperforming and we had this really tough conversation with them. And immediately, I can't even name the person, but immediately after, they went from like massively underperforming for the team to like being one of our star players within like a matter of weeks. And a few months later, I was in a performance review with them and I was like, look, it's complete 180, like you're a completely different person, what's happened? And the thing they said were like, I just didn't know I was able to do all these things. Like I thought I'd have to come and keep asking to do things and all this stuff. And I realised that when I started just doing it myself and taking responsibility, I realised I could do it.
Well, I think that it's like a misnomer that people would want a nice boss. Like if I would want a boss that, number 1, got the best out of me, number 2, helped me to progress in my career based on the things that they implemented, and then number 3, made me feel challenged. Like this is someone who recognises I have potential and therefore gives me challenges that are slightly outside of my comfort zone that I can grow into, not someone who just claps and says, well done. So that's a piece of it.
And now everyone still has a good time, but like it's very, very clear that we're on a mission here and we have to perform. And because of that, everyone's just took everything up 5-10 notches, and actually I think they're enjoying their jobs more.
You also need like why are we doing the work we're doing? And does that why of we doing the work we're doing even resonate with people? So because like no one cares if me and Niall build a big agency and own a big agency. So we can't just go, we want to make more money next year than we made this year. We're trying to hit a revenue target. Like who's going to get motivated by that? But if you can set an overarching goal of like, well actually what are we here to do? We're here to build the most well-known marketing agency in the UK. Like you can get behind that.
I recently talked to Amelia from Ivy, who just got investment on Dragon's Den from Stephen Bartlett. And if you look now, she's all over socials, all in the paper. And obviously part of that is like Dragon's Den, they just got investment from Stephen Bartlett. But the other thing is they've got this like amazing vision and mission where they started the company because their mum had like a career gap, couldn't get into work. So they started a platform that helps educate people after a career gap, generally speaking, like mothers and people who've been out of work for like childcare, etc., and then helps them get roles. But also like just fulfilling that gap in the market with that mission. I've seen now they're hiring some like very, very, very good talent, and they're everywhere. But people can get behind that mission and the vision. Like essentially, they're like a recruitment platform like LinkedIn. That's not an exciting company to join or like talk about, but it's that vision and the mission they have behind it is why like everyone's been talking about them at the minute.
Hopefully that was useful. Vlogs every Tuesday. You didn't point. You're fucking stiff as a board. You're stiff as just about this. Vlogs every Tuesday.
Vlogs every Tuesday.
No point, no movement.
I was being you.
Hopefully that was useful. Vlogs every Tuesday.